Today, I got a chance to interview Cody Payne. Cody Payne is a national leader in the small bay flex industrial space. Now, you might think that's boring, don't need to know about that. Guess what? I got into this conversation, and by the end of it, I was completely sold. I genuinely want to invest in it. I see the opportunities. It's the way of the future. And when you think about how people are living now, how people are spending their time, where people are working and how they work, today's episode is an absolute eye-opener. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you a national leader in the commercial real estate world, Cody Payne. Let's get going. This is a really, really good, actionable episode, particularly if you are a passive investor and you want to know more about where the high yields are. Hi, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Burn Your Boats podcast. I'm here today, David Shaw. Clark is away on vacation, so it's just me today. And I have an amazing guest. This is a guest with a speciality that I'm fascinated and intrigued with. Our special guest here today is Cody Payne. Cody is a 20 plus year veteran of the office and industrial real estate investment space. Now, that's a whole niche in and of itself, right? He works with Colliers International out of the Dallas area. Stick around because there's going to be takeaways, there's going to be investment tips, there's going to be passive income opportunities, there's going to be a detailed explanation about what Cody specializes in. And I kind of understand most of our listener real requirements here. And so without further ado, Cody Payne, welcome to Burn Your Boats Wealth.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. I wish you had set the bar a little lower though. That way I can exceed it a little bit easier.
I went easy on you. I went easy on you. Cody, we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things, but before we get started, Cody, people want to know about you. People want to know where you're coming from and, what set you up to even be an authority on the conversation we're having today. So, Cody, tell me where you grew up. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you found your way into your commercial real estate in the first place.
Man, my story is pretty straight and simple. Wasn't the best in school, not a college graduate. I was a car salesman, always wanted more, and met a guy that ran a small commercial real estate office, and he said he'd hire me. So I worked for him for about 10 years. He ran a small local firm, and then just got introduced to more and more people. And as I mean, a lot of people say your net worth is your net worth, and found certain avenues and kind of found my groove after a long time. And actually started my career as a leasing agent for a long time, for about 10 years, and then decided to transfer into investment sales, which, is a little risky to do, especially, I think with my background, but, and just, a lot of those guys are, dealing with, people with, college backgrounds, maybe working at, national, international firms and things of that nature. And so decided to do that. It's worked out great. I've built a great team here, a great team of guys and gals that are not just team members, but also like family. And so, and now we just scour the U.S., preaching and selling small bay flex industrial.
It's a great story. One of the big takeaways right away, Cody, is it takes a long time. If you're out there and you're listening in your 20s or your 30s and beating yourself up because you haven't, reached the mountaintop yet. Cody, you just outlined it in 2 seconds or less. It takes a long time to find yourself, to find the space, to find where you belong, find the people, the tribe that you belong in and what you're interested in. What was it that attracted you to it? Obviously, the first part was you were selling a car one day. Somebody walked into the lot. You got interested in talking to them. You're like, I want a piece of that. Is that basically how you fell into it?
I mean, it was kind of similar to that. Really, I've always, when I was young, kind of like any young man, I just had monetary goals. And
yeah.
I had never had I always wanted a Cadillac. That was kind of like my thing,
Yeah.
And this was back when Cadillac was like the car to have too.
Yeah.
And really just wanted a job that could do that. And I met a guy who, he said he does commercial real estate. He had a nice shirt on. nice and pressed, looked good. And he said, I can get you in that Cadillac. And so started working for him, and sure enough, he did. Then
It's
I
amazing.
realized, and then I would realize there was more to life than a Cadillac. But that's obviously
Of
how it
course.
starts when you're young.
It's amazing how even inadvertently these little impressions that you get when you're young, when you're out there and you haven't quite found yourself, and somebody walks into your world, either they have an impressive suit on, or yeah, and you're right, at that age your goals are just monetary. I just want somebody to pay me. I want to learn
Yeah.
something. It's not like you're in an investment guru at that age, but a lot of people want to kind of fast track that. But you got into commercial real estate, Cody, and that in itself is a very misunderstood world because there's so much of it, anywhere from multifamily to industrial to to office, to fill in all of the gaps. Cody, commercial real estate is also rife with ups and downs and macro economic, opportunities and issues. Tell me those early years. What were you guys specializing in, Cody? What specialty were you guys at?
So when I started working for David, I was more of a generalist. I was kind of doing anything that kind of came my way. Keep in mind, I was 18 years old. I was fresh out of high school. And so there were a lot of people that didn't want to work with, somebody that was so young. I always remember I called a guy to see if I could lease his building. He asked how long I've been in the business. I told him a few months. He asked how old I was. I told him, and he basically laughed and hung up the phone. And so, I mean, you do have a lot of that, which is okay. I mean, that's just part of the business. And but really getting over that youth look and feel, not having that college background. I mean, those were things that I mean, I don't blame it. I think that made me, a much better agent, to be honest with you, over time. I think some of the best people and the best people in their industries are the ones that kind of went through that harder landscape. So they really
Yeah,
understand everything from the start to finish. And instead of just kind of being handed, because there's a lot of agents now that get handed stuff, and you always think, man, that would have been nice if I could have
yeah,
been handed something like that. But then also you wouldn't have. I don't think you would have learned as much. You wouldn't have appreciated it near as much, right? Anytime you see, a high school kid or somebody driving like a brand new sports car, it's like, I drove a car that I was lucky if that thing made it to high school on time. It was,
yeah.
and so, but a lot of good experiences. But yeah, I worked for David for a long time, and I was more of a generalist. Working on a lease here, doing something over here, and then I really started honing on the office industrial side, and was like, what, I like this. I think that I can create something within this. I'm not sure what yet, but we're just going to work on
Yeah.
picking up as much of it as possible and going from there.
By the way, I've heard a good one recently. It's like, show me a trust fund kid who's had everything handed them all their lives, and I'll show you a tortured soul.
Yeah.
Because we only take pride in and value the things that we worked for and earned ourselves. And I think that that's very, very important to kind of to realize, And so you worked your way up. There is no shortcut. That you're talking about people getting shortcuts right now, but there really isn't, in my view. And you also mentioned that you weren't the best student. And there is a correlation between people who are not academic and how they perform later on in life in business, because they've had to be creative in how they found opportunities. They had to kind of work that little bit harder. And I kind of noticed that a little bit as I get older. Academic people definitely, by and large, have this early advantage, and that they can get those good jobs and they could get that good career and they could get moving and stuff like that. But ironically enough, as we hit into our mid to late 40s, I see people who maybe weren't academic but were driven and ambitious. They have this natural advantage now than the academics who've always had it. And that's not to disparage any academics, but they get to a point, academics often in their mid to late 40s, where they're like, I don't like this anymore. I don't need this. Where you and I, in many ways, are just starting our careers. We're really just we're seeing the mountaintop now, and we know that, wow, there's so much more to this because it's taken us this long to get to where we are. So I love that you said that. Now, you've worked in commercial real estate. Everybody's hating on office right now. We're going to talk about the right now in a minute.
Yeah.
there's a big correlation in who I talk to is that how they get into real estate by and large, and they read Rich Dad Poor Dad. They might have listened to a thousand episodes of Bigger Pockets, and they started off in residential. You're unusual in the fact that you didn't. You were just straight into commercial. Now, obviously, you were working there, but while you were doing this commercial, were you dabbling in residential investing at all, Cody?
No, I never. The only dabble in residential I ever had is when I was a kid. My father bought those Carlton Sheets tapes. Do you remember those? I don't know if you remember those or not.
Yeah.
It was the guy that taught you how to buy with no money down. Like this was in the early '90s.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Late at night, right?
that's right. My father, he always wanted to be a real estate investor, and he's in the trucking business, but he never made it as a real estate investor. Never, actually got into it. But that's the only residential experience I got is listening to the Carlton Sheets tapes on how to buy no money down. No, I dove right into the commercial side. Um, it's something I just had a lot more passion for it, and I'll tell you, it's if I'm not excited about it, the results just aren't there.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. And so, but no, I mean, my motivation, I mean, I'll tell you, it's still as high as ever. I still feel like I am very far behind, a lot to catch up to. I'm very, very competitive. I was actually not getting on to, but I was talking to a guy here yesterday, and I was like, man, I feel like I want you to be more successful than you want to be successful.
Wow.
And I said, that hurts, like you got to want it. And I think that comes from a passion within doing the business. And so I felt very passionate about it because when I started leasing, I mean, I had leased some retail, I had leased some other stuff. It didn't do anything for me, right? Except the money aspect of it. I didn't feel like, hey, I can come in here and actually make, be a voice in the world of this. It just didn't do anything. And so when I got into the small bay flex side, I really wrapped my arms around it and have just tried to exploit it for everything it's got.
You know what? It's very interesting, Cody. The barriers to entry to commercial is why people find it super intimidating. It's like your average man and woman listening to this podcast will will understand what commercial is, and they understand that the only way to really get involved and or do it is to invest in other people's deals. And then they hear things like, we'll just bring it right up to now for a minute, and then I want to talk about your chosen subject. Everybody, wait till you hear Cody's chosen subject. It's absolutely wonderful what he's an expert in. But before we dig into his level of expertise in his space, people find commercial, I think, intimidating, right? They don't understand it. It's the data is all pretty high level. The numbers have got a lot more zeros in them.
I mean, most of the owners are very wealthy individuals too. And,
right.
I sold him an F-150 was the first time I ever talked to a millionaire.
Right.
When I was selling a car. And then when I got into commercial, it seemed like almost all the owners were millionaires. And, we definitely didn't come from that background. So,
me too.
that could be very intimidating for a lot of people. I did karate for a long time, so I've lost in front of big crowds. So there's really nothing embarrassing that can happen to me. So it didn't intimidate me as much, but I do see it with other new agents. You're right. I mean, it can be very intimidating, especially some of these owners that you deal with.
Yeah, I think, for me, coming over, I'm Irish, and I started my life here. I don't have other family here. I just came over here myself on my own. And so, you kind of have to bury that embarrassment. If somebody's a millionaire, you're going to pick up your ears and start listening and asking them the right questions. But I always found that, even conversations about industrial or conversations about commercial, even within my own conversations with investors, they just got to glass over. They don't understand it. They don't like it. And they don't like it because let's just take a good reason why I say, commercial right now, most people will think multifamily, right? Or office, both of which are getting a pretty bad rap right now. So just real quick, as we talk about the right nows of it, Cody, office, it's not as bad as they say. It's not as good as they say. What are you seeing? Because I'll just give you some context. Good friend of mine owns about 100 office units just up the road from me here where I live. and he's 100% occupied always because they're
Yeah.
small. They are 2 to 3 office spaces. So it's all those little small businesses, your plumber, your software company, your fill in the gap, your tri lawyer, fill in all of the little small professional gaps that people need these like 1,000 square foot offices. So he's going gangbusters. So when you say office, I look at my friend, I'm like, no, he's killing it. But then you hear, okay, well, half of San Francisco is empty or half of Washington, D.C. is empty. What's the truth? What's really happening in the office spaces, Cody?
So as far as the office sector goes, kind of like what you said, your friend, it sounds like he's got more of a co-working style concept, kind of tailored to the smaller users,
Yeah,
the smaller businesses. Those have been doing pretty well traditionally. Obviously, when COVID hit, I mean, pretty much all the office guys took a good hit, but the smaller suite size, because we've got guys here that lease office space, and I'll tell you the smaller suite size, there still seems like there's quite a bit of activity in that realm.
yeah,
Now, when you start getting up to the bigger size tenants, the larger regional, national guys that, work from home really started affecting the explosion of technology since COVID, allowing, maybe fewer workers or more people to work from home or part-time. I'll tell you, there's still a lot of offices being affected, not just, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Atlanta. I mean, a lot of markets are still hurting on the office side. One of the bigger things that I know that has really hurt it is the inflation factor. So when a
yeah,
tenant leaves, it's just like multifamily. When a tenant leaves and you have to refinish out that space, the cost is so much more than it was 5 years ago. The only difference is the rental rate has not increased enough to
yeah.
make up that difference. And so that's where office, retail, multifamily are really feeling those struggles, along with taxes and insurance increasing quite a bit on them. And so I think that's what makes our product type significantly superior, especially in times like this.
We're about to talk about your product type right now and how you've managed to identify one of the most exciting opportunities really within the commercial space. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment, but I do want to hit on two things. So just to reiterate, you're saying the large office space, the downtown large, big commercial office space
The
is
big
still
users.
still a bit of a stressed
Yeah.
space, but small, let's say 4 unit office condos up in the suburbs that you see, because I drive by these things all the time and I've bought a few in my day. Amazing. Those little small, 400, 500 unit office condos that are 1,000 square feet or less. I think that's a great space. So you are drawing the same distinction between those two type of products, right?
Yeah, because when you go smaller on the office side, it's very similar to the small bay flex. I mean, when you go smaller, your tenant pool is significantly larger. And
Okay.
so the higher up you go in square footage, the fewer tenants
Yeah,
that you have. And
of
depending on the
course.
market that you're in, that number drops quite a bit. So
Right.
take the mid cities out here, for example. When I first got started in the business, there were a lot of call centers out there. There's virtually none out there now. And so, I mean, markets change rapidly.
Right. And a lot of my investors will have invested in syndications and small funds that were buying multifamily as well. And so they want to know from you, Cody, what are you seeing? Because obviously there's a lot of debt out there that's been, kicked down that it's terminated and they're, ready to renew. They got to refinance. They've used their 5 years. They kicked they had this extension for a year or two, and rates were meant to go down in the middle of 2024, and they haven't. And now these extensions even the extensions are coming up for renewal, and they're not getting calls, or they're getting maybe some of them are getting capital calls, but not all. There's like, listen, just bear with us on the syndicator side. So what do you see on the multifamily side, really, with your X-ray specs? You can see the market. What's really going on in the syndicated and fund multifamily world?
So we don't deal much in the multifamily side, but I've got
Sure.
several friends that do. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I mean, most of them kind of said the same thing, that a lot of those guys aren't able to kick the can down the road much farther.
Yeah.
And so the biggest issue that they have, obviously, is the interest rate discrepancy from when they bought it years and years ago to today. And so you have seen fully leased apartment complexes go into foreclosure, which I never would have thought is something you would have seen.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
yeah, there's a industrial guy that we were dealing with who told us he was bidding on a project in Houston that was Class A, fully leased,
Wow.
going into foreclosure.
Wow.
And it was all just because rental rate and the syndicator that bought it, I guess, couldn't get the money from the investors to, pay down what was necessary to refinance it. And so I think you will probably continue to see that. It's not on as big of a scale as I would have thought. I would have thought we were going to see a lot more office building
Yeah.
foreclosures, to be honest with you, over the past few years than we have. And so I'll be very curious to see what it comes like on the multifamily side, because I will tell you, we've had a tremendous amount of multifamily office retail people
Coming to you.
come to our assets class.
Yeah, you talk about the delay. You're saying you would have thought you might have seen more. The reason why you haven't seen more on the foreclosure side, in my opinion, is that there is banks and lenders will only foreclose if there's an exit strategy. They'd rather not manage it in the interim. So ironically enough, as rates do come down, and there is more buyers, there's more buyer participants in the market, you're going to see those foreclosures come down the pike when the market improves. Ironically, it's like everyone's like, oh, I'm going to get to here. They're just going to start cutting them off as soon as there's buyers in the market. I just don't think there's enough buyers in the market. But these lenders are not doing it for the good of their borrowers. They're kicking it down because they don't want to manage them until such time as there's buyers in the marketplace. So watch that space. But
just to add, Dave, they learned a lot in 2008, 9, and 10 on that,
the lenders,
because we were dealing with a lot of foreclosures at that point, and lenders carrying it and not understanding the operational side of it. And obviously the buyer pool was very, very short at that time as well. And so I think they learned a lot.
You're not wrong. That's why you haven't seen the hurt on the street just yet, but I just think they're playing a slightly different game. The serendipitous nature of this chat today is I was at a networking event a couple of weeks ago, and somebody is talking deeply to me about the flex space opportunities out there. So we're having this conversation. Then I'm at a different networking event, 2 weeks later, and somebody tells me about this light industrial flex space. You gotta focus in on this. And I'm like, okay, that's twice now, right? And then we get connected, Cody, and I look into your background. I'm like, man, this is a light industrial flex space specialist. So there's a serendipitous nature, and I always think these things come in threes. Cody, you're in probably what I think one of the most exciting opportunistic spaces in all of real estate right now. Why don't you tell the listeners what light industrial flex space is and why you identified after 20 years, you're looking, because you're a smart, intelligent person, you're saying that is where the future is. Tell me about it.
Well, I don't know how smart and intelligent I am, but I'll give you my best take on it. So, the small bay, so it's got a lot of names, right? Some people call it flex space. Some people call it contractor garages, small bay industrial, incubator space. I mean, it's got a lot of names to it. We just call it small bay industrial. But what it is a lot of it is, multi-tenant industrial, right? Light industrial, that is traditionally housing tenants below 5,000 square feet, right? Now, there's many of them that house tenants that are 8, 9, 10, 15,000 square feet, but for the most part, they're going to be on the smaller side. And these are the kind of buildings that you see that when you drive by, and you're seeing them a lot more everywhere across the U.S. getting built. A lot of them are made out of metal construction. That's like the big thing right now that you're seeing. Tilt wall prices are pretty expensive to do on smaller parks. But how you see it is you look at it and you see you got a garage door, and then you got a walk-in door, and many of those spaces are 1,800, 2,000 square feet, and it's a bunch of spaces lined up next to each other that are like that. And what makes it flexible is that 2,000 square foot increment, if you do it that way, obviously. But if you've got a project that's built in 2,000 square foot increments, it allows the tenant to go from 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, and then downsize at will. So it gives a tenant and a landlord flexibility to house certain businesses. And what makes these unique is back in the day when I first got started, it was all subcontractor based, right? What I mean by that is it was like electricians, landscapers, people like that. Well, since COVID has come along, the small bay world has transformed exponentially in the past 5 years. And what you see in them now is it's not uncommon to see not just your light industrial guys, but your showroom guys, your office tenants in there, retail tenants, We just closed a park not far from here. It had two tenants that came from a retail center. And when I actually was talking to one of them who made high-end desserts, they said, you know what, we don't thrive, like our traffic is not off of drive-by traffic anymore. It's social media, word of mouth, things of that nature. So we're more of a destination location. We don't need to pay the high dollar retail rent. You had an office tenant in there that was a logistics company. They didn't want to be in an office building, a multi-tenant office building, traveling up and down floors. They wanted the drive-up ability. They put their office space there. And then you had literally a car wrap shop right next to it. So these are very flexible and diverse assets. And I don't think you'll find another real estate asset that can pull from retail, office, light industrial, showroom. You just don't have it. And the other thing that makes them so great is they're one of the better inflation fighters on tenant turnover, because the finish out in the spaces are very minimal. Usually it's an office and a restroom, right? The only asset class that probably has friendlier tenant turnover TIs is probably gonna be self-storage, right? You sweep it out and you're on to the next guy. But these are very good, very efficient investments, and that's why they've been exploding all across the U.S.
It's funny, just so the listener can identify them as you're driving down the road. They normally have approximately 16 to 18 foot garage door in height, and that's how you know them. So that's what's different about them than a regular storage space. They have these super high doors, and I never even thought about this honestly until you're exactly right about COVID. I moved my family out to the Jackson Hole area for all of that, and carousing around all of the new builds, and all the new builds of these uber wealthy neighborhoods. They all have this like flex garage, that literally attached to their houses. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
And I started to have, for the first time ever in my life, I started to have these pangs of like, why don't I have one of these? I could do so much out of it. You could run an Amazon store out of it. Ironically enough, over the years, I've always, and I dislike rural real estate. I just dislike it. I can't get my contractors out there. I can't get anybody out to these places, quite frankly. But my tenants have always, like, I'll buy a rural property. It might be on an acre or something like that. A house, got a garage. More often than not, my tenant will be a landscaper or a tree guy, or he'll have trucks and all that other stuff for his business. And they'll live in a house, and, they just need the space to park all their stuff in, right? And once they move in, they never move out. Like I've got kind of semi-rural properties, certainly outer suburban properties that I've never changed my tenant in decades.
Oh yeah.
They just don't leave. So so your business now, when you think about, even just to take a small piece of what you just said, Amazon stores, the amount of people now who are housing and sorting and doing distribution and logistics, they don't want to do it from an office, to your point. A storage place is too small, but like this 2,000 square foot, they can run the business. They can have an office. They can actually have an office in there. They can have a podcast studio. They can have a marketing studio in there, and they can distribute their products. That's just to mention one use, but there's thousands of others, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's not. We've seen a huge influx in e-commerce shippers and Amazon shippers, as you'd call them. Those seem to be popping up quite a bit. A lot of training facilities, basketball training, pickleball. I mean, there's a lot of different uses. Oh yeah, there's a lot of different uses that come into it, and it's also not uncommon for some of these tenants to put a lot of their own money into it. So another project that we sold had a tumble and cheer tenant, which is basically like, children's gymnastics. And that tenant had well over $100,000 of their own money into the space, which it's also very hard to find that, in other asset classes as well. I mean, you see it in retail, I think, quite a bit more than you do in, office and other stuff. But, all that does is just dedicate the tenant more to the space. Yeah. And the tenant pool, like I said, is just diverse and very large, and especially when you're dealing in 1,800, 2,000 square foot tenant. I mean, the releasability is very good. The average rental rate increase across the U.S. is still doing very, very good, and this thing has a very, very bright future. And you now have institutions which didn't look at it before are heavily looking at it. Yeah. Blackstone made a very large purchase years ago into it. You've got quite a few others that are coming into the space, which all that's going to do is, anytime institutional money comes into any asset class or any investment, it traditionally raises the price and raises the standards on it. And so I think this asset class has a very good trajectory on it. It actually reminds me of, and you'll probably remember this, self-storage in the late 90s, right?
Yeah,
Self-storage was mostly private owner, people call them mom and pop owner.
that's right.
And now self-storage is heavily institutionalized,
Yeah.
and some of the lowest cap rates you'll find in commercial real estate.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and you're pipping me to the post a little bit here, Cody, in that I really want to get into, who's funding this stuff. Is this, by and large, in my day-to-day life, I often come across these small, older mom and pop storage units that, they're somewhat tertiary. They've been, kind of run into the ground. They haven't adopted new marketing. They haven't adopted new anything. You still got that physical pulled back gate and stuff like that. They've invested nothing in it. And I come across these things all the time. And so, like, are people going in, because there's a zoning component to this as well. And we'll get into zoning in a minute, but I have a set of clear questions that I want to talk to you about it. And let's start off with the first one. Who's funding this stuff? Typically, what size are they? What value are they? What's the scale that makes sense, and who's funding them?
So your average size right now that you see on these parks that are being built are around 50, 60, 70,000 square feet, right? And so that can sometimes make your price anywhere from, 5 million up to, 10 million, $12 million.
Yeah.
Traditional banks, are not obviously the best lenders to go to right now, like your Wells Fargo's and Chase's.
Yeah.
A lot of people are using local banks, which are very friendly in this asset class. We really don't have much issues at all on the lending side. I mean, obviously rates are not the friendliest, but as far as having a bank interested in it and liking the deal, we haven't had that issue in this asset class. We had that issue in the past, especially with metal construction. A lot of banks were not, super fond of, metal construction. That whole sentiment has changed.
Yeah.
And so as far as finding lending goes, we don't have any issues on that. As far as the buyer pool goes, it's a little bit of everybody. It's private individuals, private equity, real estate funds, family offices, institutions, syndicators. It's bringing everybody to the house, and that's what's made it most exciting for us.
Cody, are they mostly new build? New build is in on greenfield. Greenfield being something that was never built on before. Are they new build on? Are they just tearing down old storage facilities because obviously the zoning is applicable? I just tear down the old stuff and put in new. Or is it, some mix of both of those? Where are these new or not? Is the question?
I mean, there's a lot of new construction going on. I mean, it's on the rise all across the U.S. There's a lot of older existing product too. Keep that in mind. We don't see a whole lot of tear down to build new. There's a big influx of smaller local developers across the U.S. that are building in what you and I would call tertiary markets or outskirt markets outside of major cities, because a lot of these parks run heavily off of growth, homes, new development, things of that nature. And as you got a lot of larger cities continuing to expand outward, there's a huge need for flex in a lot of those areas.
A lot of these new builds are in where so our listeners can identify them. Whenever you see like really, really high levels of growth in, let's say, San Antonio or Dallas or Fort Worth, or I'm here in Tampa, and there's whole cities being built north of here.
Oh, yeah.
Tens of thousands of new homes. All of these people are your potential operators, and they're in their 3, 4, 5 bedroom home and their family. They want to drive 4 or 5 minutes, 10 minutes away and have their flex space. So that's where you got to see them. You got to see them out in the suburbs. Is that by and large rather than in town?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a huge amount in infill, but as far as a lot of the new construction that we're seeing is moving outward, because you get pool companies in here, you get cabinet guys, you get home builders, you get a little bit of everybody in these things.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon to see, like a pizza, fast food pizza or Subway or something like that go into them as well, and delis. And so, but they thrive very well off of new home construction.
And so I'm the mom and pop investor here. I'm sitting at home. I'm like, I want to take advantage of this. This Cody guy's got it all sorted out. I like what he's saying, but typically, what is your how does your average investor invest in this space. And, typically what are these kind of preferred returns and IRRs that you're going to see? So I think what I heard you saying is that there's going to be private capital doing it for themselves, so you're not going to see them available for sale at all, right? And then you're going to have syndicators building these from scratch, and they're going to be raising a certain amount of capital. And then there's going to be funds building these things from scratch. Who are the private guys? Who are the syndicators? Who are the funds? And typically, what kind of returns can an investor look for in terms of a preferred return and an overall IRR?
So if you are looking, like say you're an LP
Yeah,
investor, right? And
that's the question.
you don't want to go buy a park on your own, but you want to invest in it with
Yep.
a real estate fund. There's several that we're working with right now. I think they're paying around the mid-teens on some of these. A couple of them are, a little on the higher side. It really, depends on, if they're doing new construction or if it's an existing buy. So you've got two different avenues there, because obviously when you're doing new construction, those can, take 18 months before they're kind of really off the ground. So with where interest rates are right now, some of those syndicators are a little more cautious on those returns. But as far as going into existing product, because that's what we sell, that's our main forte right now, is we sell, small bay industrial. And there's plenty of them that, buy these, put them in a fund or do a syndication on it. But most of the ones we're seeing right now are in the mid-teens. As far as if you're an investor and you're like, what's my going in cap rate, right? And I just want to buy one on existing.
Yeah.
Depending on location, quality, all that stuff. I mean, obviously it's going to range, but it's not uncommon to see it go anywhere from 6 to 8%.
So going out, if I went out on my own and I call Cody up and say, buy me one of these, you're going to put, by and large, something around $5 to $8 million in front of me, and I can expect to see, and it was 6.5, 7% cap rates. Is that right?
Yeah, we can get you up to 8 depending on the market.
Okay, that's not a bad return. I don't hear that very often in the multifamily world. And like you said
No,
earlier
but
on,
also let me add on another little benefit that a lot of people don't realize is the type of leases on these, right? For the longest time, they were gross or industrial gross, to where, landlord just got a base rent, tenant paid their own utilities, and that was it. Well, a lot of these have been switching over to triple net leases, which, as you know, allows the landlord to recapture taxes, insurance, and common area maintenance on top of the base rent from the tenant, which helps the landlord on their, rising expenses. Obviously, you always want to try to fight those to bring them down, because your profit is your base rent. But a lot of these have been switching to triple net and are triple net leased. So that helps you out to help pay for those operating expenses. It's where their asset classes, like self-storage, like multifamily, you don't have that.
so when they're building these things out in the first place, then Cody, right? Are they more like, so you're selling them already built, right? So
Correct.
you're not just kind of assembling the operator, the land, the developer, the planning, the zoning. You're not going out getting land entitled or changing zoning use of the land already. You're just taking the built product and selling it, right? Is it more intensive to build a flex space than it is a regular old storage building? Because storage, by and large, is like one toilet in the whole building, and it's a bunch of concrete and metal. But in flex space, you've got toilets. I'm imagining sometimes you got little kitchens in them. A little bit more, I would have thought, on the build side. Is that true or false? Or just
I would say it's a little more than self-storage. I mean, you can't get any more basic than self-storage.
That's right.
A lot
That's
of those
right.
units don't even have electricity, and they just have outside lights. And so, but I'll tell you, if you build self-storage, you can do small bay flex. We see a lot of storage guys coming into the flex side, and they are very good at it. It's a very similar style build. But as far as the flex goes, there's going to be a little bit more to it, right? Because each unit has electricity. Pretty much each unit has one office and a restroom. And so you do have a little bit more infrastructure into it. But as far as the build side goes, it's I think in all of real estate, it's on the simpler side.
It's on a simpler side. And so, obviously I'm in the residential space by and large, and
You'd love
everyone.
this stuff then. You'd love this stuff then.
Oh, I know. This is why you're on the podcast. We're getting hammered by just insurance dropping us. My wife runs my personal portfolio, and she's full time, but sort of part time, working on getting us insurance because we're getting dropped here, dropped there, and there's just always just friction. There's just always friction. In this world, you mentioned the tenants, they move out. Like, by and large, just clean it out, right? Maybe paint the walls, maybe a little bit more than
Maybe.
storage.
Yeah, maybe it's very little to it. Unless the tenant goes in and spends a lot of their own money and does a lot more work. I mean, then
Right.
we have seen landlords maybe demo some offices or something to bring it more to warehouse. But the re-tenanting finish out is very low on the
And what
small
about
bay side.
insurance? What about
I mean,
insurance?
look, insurance is high. I'm not gonna pretty insurance is high on everything, right? Um, what's funny is I was actually talking to a guy in Florida, and they were trying to renew, and they got dropped, and they were trying to find it and having issues finding it, and you got to go to the right carriers for it, the people that understand it. But it's insurance is tough. I'm not going to give anybody a pretty answer. I mean, look, we got a guy here that got 10 speeding tickets last year, and he still has insurance, and people are dropping commercial property insurance. So insurance is something that's always baffled me, but there's definitely insurance out there.
Yeah, the good news is I just talking to my wife about it, and honestly, I think she's got a master's degree in insurance at this point in time, and she actually is getting, ironically enough, there's a lot of new participants in the market here in Florida, and she's actually finding it easier to place insurance on, on our own portfolio, and prices have not actually gone all up all that much, in the last year. So that's her experience. I got to bring her on the podcast, but
Yeah, well, and what's funny is speaking on insurance, there is actually a couple groups that we do work with quite a bit that manage a lot of light industrial, and they actually have the ability to add stuff into their portfolio without properly managing it. And so we have helped quite a few people out on that side.
you're actually just jumping to a question. Let's say I go out and I put 4 or 5 people together. We give Cody Payne a call. I would say, okay, we're going to raise $1 million here, myself and 2 friends, and we're going to buy ourselves a flex space. But I don't know the first thing about running a flex space. And that's just, so from my understanding of it, it's going to be a certain marketing skill, a certain tenant placement and tenant interaction skill, and then an egress exit, like as in people are coming, going, and you get maybe those broken garage doors. But you do have these things on a triple net lease. So first question first, who are the people, who can I get to manage this thing, and what gives them the skills and the history? Because if this is a novel product, what gives them the background to be able to manage? Can I hand my management over, and can I trust these people to do it?
Oh yeah. So let me tell you this: small bay industrial management is, I think, some of the friendliest property management you'll find. One, because a lot of times, depending on the lease, but a lot of times these tenants take care of their own spaces. So if they have an issue and they're on the right lease, they take care of it. We sold 2 parks to a multifamily family trust that traditionally invested in multifamily, and their managers absolutely love it. They're like, we haven't gotten a phone call after 5 p.m. on this park, and so they see it a lot more easier. There's not as many moving components in them as you see in other asset classes. And so as far as the property management goes, we see it on the easier side. And as far as finding a property manager, I can probably throw one manager over here and hit 10. And so
Amazing.
as far as us finding you one, it's not a problem. Now, the other questions you have is really the key is the leasing side of it, right? The tenant interaction. You can have the property management do it, or you can hire a leasing guy to do it. We have leasing guys here. We have leasing guys all across the U.S. that lease this stuff. Obviously, there's a fee associated with it. Most of them are paid on a commission base. So when a lease is done, that's when they get paid. And so we always advise people, look, if you've never done it, it doesn't hurt to hire one of these lease guys. I'll tell you some of the most successful parks that I know of are self-managed and self-leased.
Amazing. Amazing. I can't even, I think about it. I just want to I just want to have a laugh here with you for a second, take a break to have a laugh. Is that you just mentioned that these people don't get a call after 5. The irony in my residential portfolio, I don't get a call until after 5.
Oh
And
yeah.
particularly on a Friday night, Friday night, that's it. I've finished my work. I'm ready to, get my personal stuff done. And, so 5:30, 6 o'clock on a Friday night or Saturday morning, all of this stuff starts coming in on top of me. And, there's many, many times I'm like, man, I hate it. I hate it. So you're
Well,
saying you don't get a call before 5. I don't get a call until after 5.
and what's funny is, so when the market crashed in 2008 and 9, I bought several rent homes because I thought I wanted to be a residential investor, right, and use my money
Yeah,
to
yeah,
propel
yeah.
my life in that. And I'll tell you, it was the most frustrating thing because you're right. I'd get called at like 7 or 8, and I'd go over there and like the dishwasher's broken, and I'm like,
Oh,
look,
sure.
I've lived forever. We've never had a broken dishwasher in our life. How do you
Yeah.
break a brand new dishwasher? And so you do deal with a lot more on that side. But as far as this stuff, like I said, depending on your lease, I mean, there's a lot of these that you can buy where the tenants are responsible for everything. So all
Yeah.
you're doing is mowing the grass.
Imagine this from a residential perspective, right? We put a tenant in there and we expect the residential property to be back and never, ever, ever getting a phone call ever. Because if the dishwasher breaks down, to your point, the garage door breaks down, they get chicken bones stuck in there, you know, you name it, right? It's on them because your clients are leased up on what they call a triple net lease. For those who don't know, Cody, what is a triple net lease?
So a triple net lease is basically a lease that, and obviously, it needs to be outlined the proper way, but it can basically put a lot of the repairs and maintenance responsibility onto the tenant. So if they have a broken HVAC, they get it fixed. They're not calling you or me or the landlord. And it makes them responsible for their unit and repairs and maintenance all inside of their unit. Obviously, not on the outside. Many of these exclude roof and structure. But the triple net lease is the most landlord friendly lease in real estate.
So as I'm an owner, I've got no maintenance. Okay, I do pay my management. I am paying to insure the building.
Yes.
Do I pay property taxes?
So you pay property. I mean, you're paying all that stuff, but they're getting reimbursed from the
Got it.
tenant. And so, say you have a 10,000 square foot building and a tenant lease is 2,000 square feet. Their pro rata share is 20%, right? Because that's how much they occupy. And so they're paying you back 20% on a monthly basis of your annual expenses. So you're
Amazing.
actually getting reimbursed back your expenses. Obviously, you do a budget, you project it out. If you go over or under, you're either paying back or sending a bill for the additional. But that allows you to basically put a lot of the stuff onto the tenant, lets them operate,
Right.
puts it all in their hands. And then your job is to try to control those expenses because you want to keep them down as much as possible. Because let me give you an example. Say you're charging $12 per square foot on rate, and then your triple net cost, which is your expenses, are say $2 a foot.
Yeah.
You want to try to keep that triple net number down so that you have the ability to raise that base rate.
Yeah.
If that makes sense what I'm saying. And
Makes
so
total
because
sense.
some people will let their triple nets run wild because they're like, oh, the tenants are paying it. What's the matter with me? Well, that's just chewing into your base rate, your profit rate. So we're big believers of having a good management company on there if you're not self-managing it, so they can work on keeping those down. Because I can't tell you how many parks we pick up. Like there's one that we actually picked up the other day that's in South Fort Worth, and they're running like $4.50 a foot. We've probably sold 7 buildings down there. They're all running 2.5. So they're over $2 a foot in additional expenses they're charging to the tenant. Which if they got that fixed and down to market, they could get that on the base rate.
Yeah, amazing.
And so yeah.
There's your value add. There's your value add right there. That's if only I could do triple net leasing in residential, I would be.
They wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't do it. I mean, you'd have to get every landlord in America on board to swap now.
Doesn't exist. Just doesn't exist. And so, what's the exit strategy? So I've owned one of these. That's I'm getting my cap rate. It's chugging along. I've got my management company, but I want to sell it. How do I sell something like this?
I mean, it's very easy. I mean, they're the hottest commercial real estate asset right now. So we've got way more buyers than sellers across the U.S. There's more and more people coming into it from other asset classes, new funds being built on it. You have certain funds that all they are doing is buying and collecting as much as possible to sell off in a larger
Yeah,
portfolio.
aggregating it.
And so there's a lot of avenues to it. But then you got a lot of people, a lot of private guys buy these and they're just enjoying the cash flow
Yeah.
because they can appreciate very well on their rents. It's very landlord management friendly. And so it just really depends on your strategy. We also sell existing stuff that's under market rented. And for example, we sold a deal up in Rome, not out of country Rome, but there's actually a town called
Yeah.
Rome.
Yeah.
And they bought that project. I think the rents were around $7, $8 a foot. They were gross. They have been converting them to 10 to 12 plus triple net. So they've got almost 40% increase in rents that they're able to get there, which when you look at multifamily and retail, those big value add buys have, for the most part, been taken, right? Like
Yeah.
that was like the big thing from 2015 to 2020 is go in there, replace the sink, and we'll get you an extra 10, $20 a month from the tenant, whatever it is. There are still good value add buys that you can buy in the small bay industrial side that we're seeing from older owners that maybe had older products from 10 years and never increased rents. There's still very good opportunity on this. And I think you've got a couple years run on that until they're all snagged up.
You know, I'm getting a big dose of shiny object syndrome talking to you here
Yeah.
right now, Cody. I'm getting excited already.
I'm going to
But
send
one
you
of
a
the
few when
things
we get off that I think you'll like actually that we're working on.
one of the things that excite me most about real estate in general is, and this is my listeners know this a lot, is bonus depreciation to me is one of the most powerful financial tools available to earners in the United States. I'm sure there are others in other worlds,
Yeah.
within real estate, the use of cost segregation and bonus depreciation is massive. That's one of the main reasons I buy stuff. Quite frankly, people are like, oh, the cash flow is terrible. I'm like, that's not why I'm buying. I'm buying for a host of other reasons. Because the flex space, I know car washes are also very similar to this. There's there's so much equipment in a car wash that lasts 2 to 3 years. You literally get 80% of the car wash acquisition back in year one as bonus depreciation. You're kind of getting the car wash for free, right? When you offset it against taxes. Talk to me about bonus depreciation as it pertains to either just storage or flex storage. And the reason I asked the question is I've used self-storage investments myself over the years to up my bonus depreciation when I needed some last minute. I'm sure you know Cedar Creek Capital, AJ Osborne over there. And so,
Oh yeah.
I've definitely jumped onto their funds over the years and I use them as I haven't got enough bonus depreciation. I need something to invest in right now. So talk to me about bonus depreciation and how it pertains to this flex space investment world. Because there's not as many toilets and bathrooms and depreciatable items, tell me how bonus depreciation works or depreciation in general.
So it's going to be very similar to storage, right? Because self-storage, there's not as much money going into the project over, a 12-month period. Like you said, a car wash, those things have replaceable parts that you can consistently bring down. Office buildings, they've got consistent TIs, big air conditioner systems, elevators, things of that nature. There's a lot to go in there and do an accelerated depreciation or bonus depreciation, as you're saying. On the flex side, there's not as much unless you're making improvements to it, obviously, which I will tell you, there's actually a lot of amenities that have been coming about over the past several years that you can add on to these parks, whether it's adding on side yard storage, covered spaces, maybe small storage units, mezzanine spaces, signage. So there is a lot of things that you can do to try to capture what you're referring to as bonus depreciation. But I will say when you take it in all the asset classes, because it's similar to storage, where it is that better and tenant improvement inflation fighter, you don't traditionally get as much as you would on the multifamily from the tenant rollover, repainting, recarpeting, new fridges, new this and that. You won't get as much because there's not as much of that component. So you do have that kind of give and take on this side, but we have seen people do quite a bit on it, especially from the improvement side and going in there and making the right renovations and improvements that like the storage yard, like the mezzanine space, like the additional signage, stuff like that, that does allow you to capture that from as a landlord.
Yeah, it's just important to note that. I thought that that was an important
Yeah.
differentiator between, residential and
Oh yeah.
this part of commercial. So, I've got a question for you because we're getting close to the end here, Cody. As much as I talk to you about this all day long, we have to be cognizant of time, unfortunately. So overall, we've seen treasuries do what they've done over the last couple of months, and I did a podcast last week about them. And really, when you look at, globally, you look at where, you know, nation states are paying the most to create debt or refinance their debt.
Oh
I
yeah.
think the United States is like 13th in the world, so I think the cheapest bond rates out there in the world right now, I think, are in Switzerland, and they're like zero. People
Oh
give
wow.
people give money to Switzerland for free. Just take our money, put it into Swiss francs, because the Swiss are not printing money, and they're a good custodian of your capital. So literally, as an inflation offset, people are putting their money in Swiss francs, and therefore the yield on a 5 year or 2 year Swiss franc um, bond right now is zero. We're up, and the UK are pretty high, but we're up here, like, let's say on a 10 year, we're up at, like, last time I looked, we were like 4.67, 4.77. We're kind of bumping up against 5%, and there's every reason to suspect nobody in the world can tell you what the bond market is doing. And if you say that you can, you don't, and you won't, and you're a liar. So, I don't see any reason why bond rates are going to suddenly drop anytime in the near future. And so it looks like we're going to have some higher, you know, interest rates in the commercial space for the foreseeable future, actually. What do you see overall? Now we're going to move, take a step back from flex and just overall in the commercial world. How do you see that shaking out over the next 2 years or 3 years? They're able to kick the can down the road for a year or two or three or four, but eventually, the piper has to be paid. What are you hearing in the day-to-day world of just big commercial debt world? What are you hearing when people are coming up for all of these renewals? And I'm not talking about multifamily. I'm just talking about across the board. And what will that
Yeah.
do to valuations and the business in general?
Well, I think it's going to flush out a lot of folks, especially in, like, say, the office world, for example, right? They have a lot of CMBS debt on that side that's been coming due. I do think that a lot of those cans being kicked down the road, will come to a curb at some point and not be able to go any farther. We've already seen several office foreclosures out here. Um, one thing that I'll tell you is a lot of those investors are very resilient too. A lot of them have come to other asset classes. Like, there was a company called Silver Star that they were a big office investor,
Yeah,
and they basically said, "Hey, we're going to sell all of our office. We're going to go into the storage asset class."
amazing.
And
Right.
so you do have a lot of that happening. I think you're going to have, depending on each area is obviously a little bit different, because there are some areas out here in Texas and in Georgia and even in Florida where, there's some retail struggles, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we see it all the time, just like with Big Lots and Party City and all those guys. I mean, you've got a lot of shops that have been closing up and will continue to close up. And I think that's going to pinch quite a few of the landlords on that side as well. But I think you're going to see over the next 12, 24, 36 months, I think you'll see more foreclosures than you did in the past.
We were talking off camera before we started here about, yeah, I feel that I'm almost behind the eight ball. I feel like I've got so much more to do. The reason I feel that is as a custodian of people's money, I feel so incredibly personally responsible for it. But even when everything's booming, the sun is shining, interest rates are low, and everybody's investing, there's an argument that that's the most dangerous time to invest. And the
Yeah.
most lucrative time to invest is when it's at its worst, when it's darkest, when everybody on the street is hiding behind, cash and sitting on the sidelines. That's the time to get out and do things. And you're telling us here where the capital is moving for the next 10 or 15 years. And I don't disagree with you. But I've got a question as we wrap up. And this is my final question to you, Cody. Cody, I was watching some of your social media. It's very impressive.
Oh, thank you.
You noted that you had these personal goals for 2025. And I'm
Yeah.
really curious about what are your personal goals for 2025 and how do you see, because obviously those goals are going to be reflective of what you think is going to be successful. So that's why I asked the question. So what are they?
So, I mean, on the personal side, obviously here, me and the guys, we always get together and we do our personal, we do our business. Some of my personal ones are obviously certain fitness things, right? I'm big into fitness and working out. And so I've got a few things on that side to, get to a certain body fat percentage and to maybe try to gain, a certain amount of muscle if I can, because I've only got a short amount of time in doing
Right.
that before maybe my body starts to retrieve. And then, I've also got a kid on the way, and so I've gotten certain goals in that, and then wanting to be obviously the best father that I can be, and be the best husband that I can be. So there's certain things that I need to do, for my wife to, make her as happy as possible. And then I'm also very big in my family, and my father and my mother, they're very close to me, and so I've got certain goals with him. So like one that I had a couple of years ago. He's a big Mustang fan. I'm a big classic car guy. I don't know if you know
I
that or
saw
not.
that.
He is too. And so I had a goal of he'd never had a new car before, so I wanted to buy him a new Mustang GT, and I actually did that. And
Wow.
so yeah, that was one. But just certain things like that. And actually, there was a goal that I had since I was a kid that I think we just we're almost there to it. Was I wanted to buy a piece of land, split it in half, build a house on one side, and then my parents, get them a house on the other side, and so we're in the process of doing that as well.
Wow. That's amazing. They're really
Yeah.
great goals. Like when you gave your dad that Mustang, that must have been a tear
Oh,
jerker.
it was one of the best days of my life. I'll tell you that. I mean, it was awesome, and
Oh my God.
yeah,
It's amazing.
it was
And your
definitely
business
something.
goals, Cody, your business goals for the year, what do they look like?
So mine is helping our guys here more than anything, right? Not just helping myself. We've got flex-based domination book, which we brought out last year. We want to continue to expand on that. That thing has been absolutely fantastic for us. But we want to continue our listing goals, investment goals of investing in a certain amount every quarter, and then on the new construction side as well. And so, because not only are we just brokers, we also are investors and developers in this space as well. So we've got plenty on that side to keep us
Well,
busy, and we always make it more than we can achieve. And
you're halfway there, at least.
we've never no, we're not even halfway. We've never hit our goals. We put them so high, it's not even funny.
I like it. Well,
Yeah.
Cody, so you say, so that's what I was trying to get out of you there. So are you raising capital yourself and building? Are you raising capital yourself and acquiring? And are you doing so inside a fund or a syndication? So, just curious about that.
So we don't run a fund. There's a group that we do work with on the new development side. If there's a project that we really like, we'll put together a syndication on it.
So you have syndicated these
Yeah.
new deals yourself, and
Oh yeah.
what's my understanding of most syndications that they're a buy, build, or they're a value add, but then they sell. And a
Yeah.
syndication, is there always an exit at the end of it?
Um, Not always. Some of them are long-term holds. So we did a project not long ago that was pretty large infill, and that's just a good long-term legacy asset.
And so your investors there are getting what, 6, 7% preferred returns, 8%, 9%?
They're bouncing probably between 7 and 9.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And that's my final question is, my investors have got to the point where they like passive. We've
Who
been talking
doesn't?
about it. I know, right? Right. Who doesn't, right? But they also don't want risk because there's a lot
Yeah.
of, as I say, there's a lot of these value add, multifamily, investments that, quite frankly, are most of the investors are many investors are going to lose their money,
Yeah.
because that investor equity is the first thing. The syndicator's profit goes first, investor equity goes second, and the debt is third, right?
Yeah.
And so, inside your world, how can people connect with you? How can people talk to you about investing passively? You know, let people know how they can get to you and discuss personally with you, what you've got going on?
Easy. Reach out to us, flexbusinessparks.com. That'll give you a bunch of intel that you need on the small bay flex industrial side as well. It's a great way to contact us. We can tell you about stuff that we're working on, stuff that we're looking at. As far as on the LP side, I mean, obviously, everybody wants passive income and they want the safest income. What I do like about the small bay flex side that we've seen for a long time is, these are low operating cost investments, right? So a lot of times at 20, 25, 30%, they are at their break-even point. And whenever you have small bay, it's similar to, it's funny, now that you say that, we've heard plenty of people from the multifamily side call this the multifamily of industrial, right? And so when you lose a tenant or two in a lot of these parks, you really don't notice it as much.
Sure.
And because you're not housing somebody that's taking up 30, 40% of your building, like in big box industrial or in like certain office stuff. And so they are very friendly on the syndicator side. I think that's why so many have been coming to it, because they do have that ability to, hey, we can go from 100% to 80%, and we're not stressing.
Yeah, the upside of that is, you say you're not going from 80%, but then you're at 100%. So in your world, you're never at 100%, but you're never at 80% either. So
yeah,
you're somewhere in between.
And a lot of times, I mean, they're operating in the 90s pretty well.
That's amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Well, Cody, you've got me excited, and I'm looking forward to talking to you off camera about what you're working on right now. But just one last time, what was that website address again?
flexbusinessparks.com.
There you go. You have it. That was Cody Payne. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. And Cody, I'll leave the last word to you. You're the guest.
Man, appreciate y'all listening. David, I appreciate you having me on. And, obviously, if you're interested in the small bay flex industrial, give us a shout. Me and the team will get you taken care of, get you on the right track.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you so much.
All right, bud.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Look, we truly appreciate your support and hope you found the conversation insightful and engaging and useful. If you enjoyed the show, would you please take a moment to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform? Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at contact@burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats Wealth podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you and have a great day.